All right, let's jump right in. Today we're going deep on this paper, fully incentivizing translation capability in LLMs via reasoning learning. You know, sometimes those titles can be a mouthful, but basically it's all about making AI translate more like a human.
Yeah, it's moving past that, like word-for-word robotic translation we often see.
Exactly. Because we humans, we use logic and context when we translate, right? This paper is about teaching AI to do the same thing.
It's pretty fascinating stuff.
It really is. Okay, so for the first minute, let's give our viewers a quick rundown of the key insights, just a taste of what this paper is all about.
Sounds good.
So this paper introduces R1 Translator, or R1T1 for short, a framework that uses, get this, chain of thought prompting. It basically guides the AI through a step-by-step reasoning process, much like a human translator would think.
And that's where the magic happens, you know? Mimicking that human thought process, it leads to some seriously impressive results.
Like way better accuracy, right?
Right. And the coolest part, R1T1 actually learns and refines its reasoning abilities through reinforcement learning.
So it's not just stuck with what it was initially trained on. It can actually evolve its skills.
Exactly. This means it can handle unseen languages and even tackle complex literary texts, things that have traditionally been really hard for AI.
We're talking about a model that not only understands multiple languages, but can also grasp the nuances of different writing styles, from technical documents to, like, poetry.
Pretty amazing stuff.
The researchers really put it through its paces, tested it on various data sets, including that big one, Flores 101. And let me tell you, the results are, well, pretty groundbreaking.
Definitely groundbreaking. R1T1 consistently outperformed those baseline models, achieving some state-of-the-art performance in multiple translation tasks. This research is really changing the game. It's pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible with AI translation. Huge implications for the future, breaking down those language barriers.
Absolutely.
Okay, now that we've got the quick summary out of the way, let's dive deeper into the nitty-gritty. Now, I'm sure many of you out there, you know the limitations of traditional machine translation, right? Yeah, it can be pretty clunky, very literal, often missing those subtle meanings, the cultural context.
Right, like those idioms that just don't translate directly.
Exactly, and that's because a lot of times it lacks that human-like reasoning. Think about how a skilled translator approaches a complex text. They're breaking down idioms, considering the broader context, maybe even back-translating to double-check their work.
They're using all sorts of cognitive tools, right?
A whole arsenal.
And that's exactly what these researchers behind R1T1 wanted to replicate.
They didn't want to just improve accuracy. They wanted to build an AI that could really understand the text it was translating.
Okay, so how'd they do it? The paper highlights 3 key innovations that really make R1T1 stand out. First, they went beyond just translating literature. They applied reasoning to a much wider range of domains and tasks.
Exactly. They wanted a model that could handle anything: legal contracts, medical reports, everyday conversations, all with that reasoning baked in.
Very cool. What's the second innovation?
The second was all about making those AI-generated chains of thought as human-like as possible. So they worked with, expert translators to develop these 6 distinct CoTs templates, each representing a different reasoning strategy.
So like blueprints for different ways of thinking about translation.
Exactly.
And the third innovation?
The third was the integration of reinforcement learning. So the AI can actually learn from its mistakes and discover its own reasoning paths.
So even if it's faced with a brand new translation challenge, it can figure out how to approach it.
Right. That self-learning ability is key because it means the model isn't limited to just what it was trained on. It can adapt and refine its skills.
That's really impressive. Now, before we get into those fascinating CoT templates, let's talk about the data set, the training data. They needed something pretty robust to really push this model to its limits, right?
Yeah, they started with 2,000 parallel translation pairs, carefully chosen to represent different text lengths, content types, and domains. They wanted to make sure the data set covered a variety of translation challenges.
So news articles, literary excerpts, even those specialized texts like legal or medical documents.
All of that, yeah. They really aimed for diversity.
And for languages, what did they focus on?
Initially, they zeroed in on 6 major languages: English, Chinese, Japanese, German, French, and Russian. They sampled 100 parallel pairs for each translation direction within those languages. So a really carefully crafted data set.
That's a lot of data.
Yeah. This set the stage for a model that could handle the complexities of, real-world translation.
Not just some simplified textbook examples.
Exactly. Okay, so now let's get into those human-aligned translation, UT, templates. Remember, these are like giving the AI a set of guidelines, a way to think through a translation problem, just like a human expert would.
It's like giving them a cheat sheet for those tricky linguistic puzzles, right? So what kind of reasoning strategies do they actually bake into these templates?
Well, they started by, identifying 6 common strategies that human translators use all the time. And then working with language experts, they translated those strategies into these, actionable templates that the AI could understand.
Okay, so what are those 6 magical strategies?
All right, so first up, we have hierarchical translation. This is all about breaking down complex sentences into smaller, more manageable chunks, kind of like outlining a complicated essay before you actually start writing.
Yeah, makes sense. It's got to be easier to translate piece by piece, right?
Exactly. And then next, we've got back translation. That's a classic technique, translate the target text back into the source language to check for accuracy.
So you can make sure the original meaning isn't getting lost in translation.
Right, like an extra layer of proofreading. And then there's triangulation translation, which is especially useful for bridging the gap between languages that have really different structures.
So, like if you're trying to translate a Japanese idiom directly into English, you might lose all that nuance, the cultural context, right?
Exactly. It'd be like explaining a joke that only makes sense in a specific culture. You need more than just a literal translation. So, this is where triangulation comes in. It involves using a third intermediate language to help preserve the meaning. Like, you might translate from Japanese to French first, and then from French to English.
So you're finding that common ground between the languages, a bridge to help carry the meaning across.
Precisely. Now, the fourth template focuses on context-aware translation. It recognizes that the meaning of a word or phrase can change depending on the surrounding text.
That's super important, especially in dialogue, right? The same word can mean totally different things based on the tone of the conversation.
Absolutely. Context is everything. Then we have translation explanation. This one's really cool because it encourages the AI to actually justify its translation choices.
Wait, so the AI explains its thought process.
It does. It's like having the AI think out loud, giving us a peek into its reasoning. And this not only helps to ensure accuracy, but it also gives us some insights into how the AI is approaching the task.
It's like having translator's notes built right into the process. That's amazing.
It is. And then finally, we have structural transformation. This one addresses the fact that, different languages have different grammatical structures.
Right. Sometimes a word-for-word translation just doesn't work. You need to restructure the whole sentence.
Right. So this is the AI learning to be a grammar guru across multiple languages. It's not just translating words, it's understanding the underlying syntax and adapting it for the target language.
Very impressive. So with this incredibly diverse data set and these meticulously crafted CoT templates, they really set the stage for R1T1 to shine. But, the real test is in the results. How did it actually perform?
Right. Did all this fancy reasoning actually lead to better translations? Well, to find out, they put R1T1 to the test on the Flores 101 data set. That's kind of like the ultimate challenge for machine translation models.
It covers 11 languages, a huge variety of domains, a really tough benchmark.
Yeah, it is. And they didn't stop there. They also wanted to see how well R1T1 could generalize its knowledge to languages it had never even seen before. Talk about a challenge.
So how did they measure the quality of the translations? What metric do they use?
They use something called Comet Score, which goes beyond simple word matching. It takes into account fluency, adequacy, making sure the meaning is there. It's a more sophisticated way to evaluate how well the machine captures the essence of the original text.
Okay, so drum roll, please. What were the results? Did R1T1 live up to the hype?
It totally did. It outperformed other state-of-the-art models, showed big improvements in accuracy across the board, and remember those unseen languages? R1T1 handled them really well.
So it could actually apply what it had learned to brand new linguistic contexts.
Exactly. The reasoning abilities really allowed it to generalize its knowledge, but they didn't stop there. They also wanted to see how R1T1 handled literary translation, which is notoriously difficult.
Right, because with literature, it's not just about conveying information, it's about capturing those subtle shades of meaning, the emotions, the cultural references that make a text really come alive.
Right, so they tested it on a separate data set specifically designed for literary translation using Chinese and English texts.
Yeah, they do though.
It was impressive. R1T1 once again outperformed the baseline models and even a model trained with supervised fine-tuning. This suggests that reasoning isn't just good for, technical or factual translation, it's crucial for capturing the nuances of creative writing as well.
So we're getting closer to AI that can translate not just the words, but the artistry of literature, the author's unique voice and style.
That's the goal. But they didn't just rely on these quantitative metrics. They also did something pretty cool to visualize the reasoning process.
Oh, tell me more.
So they took a complex sentence from the Chinese dataset and had R1T1 translate it into English, both with and without the self-evolution mechanism enabled, and then they visualized the steps the AI took so they could compare the reasoning pathways.
So it's like peeking under the hood and watching the AI think in real time. What did they find?
The results were striking. The translation with self-evolution enabled was just, much more nuanced, more fluent, and contextually rich. It wasn't just this robotic word-for-word substitution.
Like comparing a rough draft to a polished final piece.
Exactly.
This whole deep dive into R1T1 has been really eye-opening, It's amazing to see how far machine translation has come and the role reasoning is playing in pushing it even further.
Yeah, it's like combining those cutting-edge AI techniques with, a deep understanding of how humans think and use language. It's really cool.
It is, but like with any research, there are always limitations, areas for improvement. What are some of those areas where you think this research could be expanded upon?
Well, one thing that jumps out is the language coverage. The initial training dataset included 6 major languages, but there are so many languages out there, and many of them are even more challenging for machine translation.
Especially those low resource languages, right? The ones that don't have tons of data available for training. I'd be curious to see how R1T1 performs when trained on a much more diverse set of languages.
Yeah, me too. Expanding that language coverage would give us a more complete picture of its capabilities. And another area, maybe exploring even more complex CoP templates.
You mean going beyond those initial 6 reasoning strategies?
Exactly. Human translators use so many different strategies, We could try to incorporate more of that complexity into the AI model. For example, how do we teach AI to adapt its translation style based on the specific cultural context?
Oh, that's a good point. A joke that works in one culture might not work in another. Cultural sensitivity is so important.
Absolutely. And then there's humor, irony, figurative language. Those are things that AI has traditionally struggled with. Like sarcasm, it's hard to translate because it often relies on subtle cues and understanding the context.
It's not just the words themselves, it's the intention behind them, right?
Exactly. It's a lot to ask of even the most advanced AI.
It is. But I think R1T1 shows that it's possible, that we're moving in the right direction.
I think so too. By continuing to explore these reasoning-based approaches, we can get closer to AI that truly understands and conveys all the richness and complexity of human language.
So what's the big takeaway for our viewers today? What should they be thinking about after learning about R1T1?
I think the key message is that the future of machine translation isn't just about bigger models or more data. It's about teaching AI to think like a human translator, to reason, to strategize, to adapt.
R1T1 is a great example of that. It shows that reasoning isn't just a nice bonus, it's essential. It allows AI to go beyond simple word substitution and really grasp the meaning behind the text.
Right, and as we continue to explore this intersection of reasoning and machine translation, we're opening up so many possibilities, breaking down language barriers, facilitating communication across cultures. It's pretty exciting.
It's a future where information flows freely, where ideas are shared effortlessly, and people from all walks of life can connect on a deeper level. And that's definitely a future worth working towards. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep pushing those boundaries.